Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we do need to go through and refresh our viewer contracts here fairly soon, but this is not the episode that we're going to do that in. That's perhaps next episode or the one after, depending on how this ends up going. We need to do a moon landing mission for science, and that is what we're going to work on. Now, our current moon lander has some problems. If we open up our moon lander here, our primary issue is we just don't have enough oomph to lift this thing into orbit. Now, we could definitely consider dropping this T800 fuel tank or downsizing it to a T400. Those are potential options, and that would definitely boost up our weight ratio here. Now, this is the auto-saved variant, not the version that I slightly modified after this flight. There we go. This is a version where we are... Oh, hello. What do we got going on here? You should not be doing that. Okay, 1, 2... This one could just go in like so. Cool. That way, all 4 of these are just pumping inward, and that will do a little bit better for our thrust-to-weight ratio. Emphasis on little bit. So 1.23, a little slow off the pad, and we'll have 86 seconds of burn here, and then 175 seconds of burn here. I'm interested in seeing what just this change to the staging does. So let's run a simulation of just this lower stage here and see how it goes. I'm not necessarily expecting this to be magnificent. We're still going to probably be underpowered by a significant margin on this lower stage here. And we can take steps to address that. But the Moonlander itself is also going to need a little bit of work. I think we're going to need like 320 total science on the way back. That seems doable, right? From a moon landing? Yeah, absolutely. So I think we'll be okay on the moon lander front as long as we can get there. And Jeb, Bill, Bob is actually who we're going to want to bring on this. But this is a simulated launch just to see how this first stage goes. Seems perhaps slightly better off the pad. And, I mean, we do still have... Our speed is not amazing. I'm betting we also have problems with our weight to center of lift issue. That's probably going to be some amount of problem. Let's go up to 100 meters per second here before we head over. And we'll see what this feels like. I'm just wanting to get a feel for this. Okay, it very much doesn't like to turn. I'm not shocked about this. Remember, we swapped out for reliance over here for additional thrust to weight. So that is unsurprising. And yeah, we do not like to turn too fast. But it seems kind of okay. We've got 30 seconds left on this burn here. We're drifting upwards. There's no doubt about that. Our speed is on the low side. That is concerning. Our control authority is also on the low side, but that's only a problem in this ascent phase. We've got 10 seconds until our detachment, so at this point we should lock prograde. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Clean detach as expected. So that was never going to be the concern there. The concern is, how do we do on getting to orbit? And you can see 0.57. This is a very, very anemic stage. And with this extra T800 fuel tank here, that is to be expected. We can see our apoapsis height is too low and our time to apoapsis is too low. So it's just a matter of too low thrust to weight. Once we get here, I honestly feel like our first stage, like with our side boosters, I feel like that thrust to weight is manageable. It's not great, but it's manageable. But yeah, you can see here we're going to hit the apoapsis. So as I said, we're going to revert this. I just wanted to get a feel for what that felt like. We might be able to get away with just downsizing this to a T800, or rather a T400. So let's see what that feels like. That's going to reduce our weight fairly dramatically, and I want to plop that over like this. I don't really like the way that these are attached now, so I'm just going to redo this real quickly. What does that put our thrust to weight at here? 1.27. And then once we're up here, 0.47. But that'll be a little bit better. Heavy on the little. So I'm also going to drop this down to a T400. Does this not have a... This doesn't have a decoupler. Okay, good thing we discovered that. We'll put in a TD... Not a 25. We'll put in a TD12 decoupler here. That's definitely a good thing that we discovered. And we are going to put in a T400 here. That is going to increase our power of our first stage dramatically. So that's up to 1.35 now. Now, we're relatively stable, surprisingly. I didn't really expect that. And for this stage, I guess we can have it be black and white. I think that's okay. For this up here, I want this to be white so that it's a little differentiated. Actually, let's make this be gray and orange, just so that we can see the different stages a little bit more clearly. So something along the lines of this. Now, this is still going to be very underpowered in this first stage. Do we have any engines that are a better sea level engine than the Reliant? What is the Reliant's sea level thrust? 240 kilonewtons. I mean, technically thuds are better at vacuum. No, they're not. What am I even talking about? The at sea level for Reliance is 205. Okay, that's what we need to be checking for, but I don't think that we have anything better that's not a solid fuel booster. Yeah. So, Reliance are definitely the best that we have right now. We could swap this swivel with a Reliant. That's going to give us even less control authority. We're going to have no engine gimbaling if we do that. But this is going to give us, just dropping essentially a T800 worth of fuel is going to do two things. One, we're going to have less thrust to weight, or rather higher thrust to weight, but we're going to have less delta V overall. The real question is, does this get into orbit? And I suspect the answer to that to be no, and if that is indeed the case, and we need to adjust this staging a wee bit here, we need to have this engine fire, and this does not go here. So this would go up here. Beyond that, I think the staging is largely broadly correct. I don't know where this stage is, so. Okay, yeah, that needs to be moved, for sure. So that gets moved not to here, but rather to here. So actually, it was kind of okay where it was. Okay, that stage gets gotten rid of. This stage is definitely too high up. So that gets moved down to, like, here. So these fire, and then the side boosters detach. Then the main booster detaches, and our orbital engine fires. And then that detaches, our second orbital engine fires, and we would do something kind of like this. That's the correct staging. Okay. So with the staging correct, if we go to Kerbin here, and we check in on our stage 6. Stage 6 has 300 dV. That is not the level of dV that I'd like to see here. Stage 5 apparently also has 300 dV. Most of the dV is contained in stage 7. 7 and 8. Something doesn't seem quite right here. I mean, I know that this thrust to weight ratio is low, but I did expect to have these two be more than like 800 dV. Actually, it's not even. It's like 700 dB. That's surprising. Okay, I'm going to save this here. We'll see if this is accurate. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dip this, or ditch that rather, and we're going to launch this. We're going to put it out into orbit and see if those numbers are actually accurate. 700 dV is far less than I would have expected, given the amount of fuel and the amount of efficiency that we have built into these two stages. Now, I'm not shocked that the bottom stage is a little too weak. It's this stage only having 385. That's remarkable to me. So we're just going to pop this up into orbit as a test here. and see if those numbers are accurate. This is claiming 83 DV. No, 332, 385. So it is claiming those same amounts of DV. That is remarkable. More specifically, it's this that is remarkable. 113 seconds of burn. Oh, I'm dumb. We don't have fuel crossflow here. We could enable crossfeed here, and that would help a lot. But really what we want is a fuel line. So that's 2237. That's more like what I wanted to see. Okay, so we're going to head back to the VAB. That problem is solved. I'm going to put in the fuel lines here. Crossfeed would work, but it would draw evenly from these rather than drawing from these first. We could fix that, but it's probably easier to just fill it in like this. So I'm going to actually open our saved version real quick here. And we still have some first stage issues, and this is very weak, but I'm not surprised about that. So one thing we could think about doing is A, this. B, we drop this, and we put in a T800. The T800 would mean that once we hit 70 kilometers here, and we fire up the stage 6 engine, this would now have 621 DV. But what if we lifted this empty and we moved fuel in from here? That would assume that this had sufficient fuel to get to orbit. So there's that. It doesn't. 1.26 here. We drop this, and we're essentially just moving our fuel upward, but that's actually a good thing. So 1.3 and 0.49. Yeah, this is still very grim here. Now, we could stack on additional boosters. That is always an option. We can go another layer here. And that might be the route that we end up going, where we have this here, and then we put, say, like, thumpers out here. Something like this. The thumpers would be attached like that. And then we would just move them down a little bit so that we're resting like on the thumpers. We would put in struts. This is a theoretical possibility, and I may end up going this route. We would just strut those in like that, and then we would put on some hemispherical liquid fuel tanks on here. And then we would just run that fuel from the outside in. And it would be something like this. Thrust to weight here is not enough to lift off, so we would, of course, need to combine these stages together. And it would be something kind of like this. This is becoming a monstrosity, but it's very Kerbal. There's no doubt about that. It's incredibly, incredibly Kerbal. My main question is, we have 25 seconds of burn. Is that on the thumpers? That's 38 seconds of burn. And 64, okay. So I'm guessing that's on the thumpers. So the thumpers would detach after 25 seconds. That would get us a lot of vertical speed. Now, if we look at our center of mass and our aerodynamic overlay, yikes. But these do gimbal. So it might be okay. But what if we were to have the Delta Deluxe wing? No. I was going to talk about having the Delta Deluxe winglets out here, but I've decided I hate that plan. This is now 50K and getting more expensive all the time. But it should be reasonable-ish. My main concern remains this level of fuel here not being enough to get us to the moon. We could have some theoretical, like, strap-on fuel tanks that could be ditched. Oh, this is getting wild in my head. We probably shouldn't do that. I'm interested in seeing... Oh, this didn't save. This reverted. Okay, so there we go. So we know that this thrust to weight is plenty high, 1.84. So I want to limit this down to 1.6. That is where I like to sit at. 1.61? Yeah, that seems good. 35 seconds of burn. So we know that these tanks are going to be emptied by the time this is burned. We know that these are going to detach before the side tanks do. But this does add additional points of failure. What we really need is tech to make this happen. We can do this in a much more clean manner if we have better tech. But I think this will do. I think. Let's run a quick test of our ascent stage here and see what kind of speeds we get to. It should be quasi-reasonable, in theory. We're still going to have very low thrust to weight in our center core stage once we ditch our two side layers. So that's definitely still going to be a thing. This is very dumb looking. Okay, off we go at a reasonable rate. With a very reasonable ship here. Definitely very reasonable. Perhaps the most reasonable ship. And we've got lots of DV here, and our DV is kind of fluctuating all over. We should definitely be starting to get ourselves some horizontal velocity here. And we're working on that. We've got about 20 seconds until the SRBs burn out. We definitely are seeing better speed out of this. There's no doubt about that one. So we're punching up through the atmosphere a lot better with this. 10 seconds of burn left in the SRBs. So at this point, we're going to just lock to prograde. 6, 5, 4. These are not 1 second per second. Okay. 3, 2, 1, 0. Off go the SRBs. Fantastic. And yeah, this seems absolutely fine. The SRBs definitely give us the kick that we need. So that works. That absolutely does work. We should probably be a little bit more aggressive here on our gravity turn. That said, we're going to be losing our side boosters here in just a moment. So, we've got about 5 seconds on that, and we do see that our apoapsis height is dipping up into space. So this is looking reasonably solid. We ditch that, and then we've got 800 meters per second. This stage being this anemic is still a problem, for the record. The rest of this ascent seems fine. But these two stages are very, very low in terms of their power levels. There's no doubt about that. We have a lot of fuel here. A lot of DV is contained here. We probably have enough. Probably. Yeah, I think we do have enough. It's viable, but it's certainly not ideal. I wonder what our control looks like if this is a reliant instead of a swivel. We already don't have that much control authority. We're basically going to be reliant at that point on our SRB gimbaling, on our Delta Deluxe winglets, and on our SAS. Which is not tremendously amazing, right? And we're moving pretty slowly here. The SRBs propelled us up into orbit, or not into orbit, into space. We're still struggling a bit to hit orbit. So it'll take virtually all of the DV that we have here just to achieve orbit at this point. So that's concerning. I mean, it bears noting that this is an extraordinarily heavy payload for 1.25 meter. There's no doubt about that. But this should really be transferring us to the moon. So, what does that mean? That means we need about another 500 meters per second out of that first stage, out of our boosters. What can we do about that? Well, we could actually increase our number of SRBs. So what we would do then is we would detach this, we would go to 4x symmetry, and we would attach it about here. Then we duplicate it and also attach it about here. Now, this is getting really dumb looking. There's no doubt about that. And I'm kind of concerned at this point. I think that we need to move these slightly. So I'm kind of concerned about our detachment clipping our Delta Deluxe winglets, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to move this to be here instead. And do we move these guys over too? So this would then be moved to be like here? Yes. Something like this. Now, this is going to be a lot of... Actually, that's only 1.78. Well, they're already at 0.75. So we need to drop them down to, like, I don't know, 2/3 thrust? If both of them are dropped down to 2/3 thrust, that puts us at 1.65. So we could drop both of these down to, like, 60% thrust, probably. A little higher than that, actually. Like 62. Yeah, that looks good. So that gives us extra burn time in our SRBs. The main question here is, how quickly are our SRBs going to detach before the fuel tanks do? What if, hypothetically, we were lifting off exclusively with our SRBs? Now, this is going to cause a problem with these fuel tanks. 0.89. So this does not lift. Okay. That's noted. Okay. We're going to be detaching our side tanks very quickly after we detach our SRBs at this point. But we have more headroom here. So, what if we were to add in, on our side tanks, this? It's, slightly ridiculous. 1.42. We actually do have the headroom for this. 70% thrust here. And let's try 75. Okay, we have a mass limitation here. That's noted. We could think about dropping these down to just T400s. Like this. Okay, that seems reasonable. We still have a mass limit of 11 tons. So dropping this, yeah, it's the SRBs that are doing it. SRBs are really, really heavy. So that is noted. I'm going to revert this back a little bit. Do we want to just upgrade our pad? We can do that. We have the money. But we're going to need to do it eventually. So we do something like this. Our detachment here is going to be interesting, but as long as we're at prograde, it should be fine, in theory. This is 1.42, so we would want to bump these up to, like I said before, around 75. Yep, 1.58. That seems reasonable. We have a lot more burn time here. I mean, I think this would do the trick. It's insane. Way overbuilt over what we could do if we had better tech, but we need to get the tech, so it seems reasonably fine to me. We'd need to upgrade our launch pad at some point anyway, right? So how much is this going to cost to upgrade? 282,000, do it. Okay, so that puts us at 677. Looks good. We'll head back into the VAB here. And I want to run one final simulation. The real flight heading to the moon is going to be next episode, looking at this timing. I want to run a simulation and see how the detachments here go. The main concern here is that we're attached to the side boosters here rather than up here. We can move that if we need to, but I want to see if that's necessary. So we'll save and launch this, and we'll see what this monstrosity looks like, soaring majestically through the air like the horrible creation it is. It is hideous. There's no doubt about that. We will make much better rockets with better tech. But right now, all we've got is 1.25 meter. And that diameter is really, really, really tough to lift this with. So we'll see. Double checking staging here. It looks okay, in theory. So off we go. About the same liftoff off the pad. And we've got about 40 seconds of burn time here. Cool. And these aren't real seconds either. I don't know why the game does that sometimes, but it definitely does. So we're heading on over to get some horizontal speed. We're still interested in mostly vertical at this point, of course. Okay. So this is the final, like, certification light here. If we don't notice any major issues with this design, then this is what we'll use until we get access to the 2.5 meter diameter rocket parts, which are much, much better. Much better. Okay, so we're heading on over. We have about 10 seconds right now until our detachment. I'm going to stop heading over and not go back onto here until 5 seconds this time. Okay, so we'll go back onto prograde, just adjusting our roll a little bit. Okay. Clean detach of SRBs. That's great. And I'm just going to stick on prograde for right now. We are at about 30 kilometer apoapsis. We've got a 70-second burn on this. It appears to be working. And we may want to change the coloration of these, like swap that coloration maybe. Yeah, that would probably be something I'd like to do. I mean, we're going at 700 meters per second here. This seems reasonably viable. This is now at 0.63, so that's better. Definitely better. And at this point, we could definitely be burning pure horizon, which I'm interested in doing. We're going to burn purely horizontally from here. Not having the gimbaling on those engines definitely makes that interesting, but the fact that the atmosphere is this thin at this point means that it's fairly doable to hold attitude here. Cool. So we're just going to push up our orbital velocity here. We can see our apoapsis height is reasonable at 75 kilometers. We've got 5 more seconds here, and it should be a quasi-reasonable detachment. This is the danger point, though. Okay, that looks very clean. Very clean indeed. We can see time to apoapsis is still dropping, so we definitely don't have a coast phase here. But we're moving much faster. There's no doubt about that. And I mean, we've got 90 seconds of burn left here. We're going to hit the atmosphere, or rather the vacuum, fairly soon here. And the apoapsis height is going up by a decent chunk. Time to apoapsis is now increasing. Okay. Cool. So let's target 100 kilometers here, and that'll give us some amount of coast phase. It's definitely kind of slow, no doubt about that. But that should give us a coast phase of some description. We're very close to orbital speed now, so we'll be able to do some of our orbital transfer with, or actually no, that's going to be circularization that we're going to do with this and this. But there's not going to be a lot of circularization burn needed. Let's see what that circularization burn looks like in terms of DV. That's going to be very important in planning this out. Okay, look at that. We get the circularization burn done all on this stage. So all of this can be used for transfer over to the moon. Now, we're going to burn all of it on that transfer and a little bit of this fuel as well. And that I don't like. But I do think that we have enough DV in this to get this done as is. Like, this is fairly overbuilt. There's no doubt about that. And now the booster is in the situation that I would consider to be tenable. We don't have a lot in terms of pad space, particularly in this stage. This stage is the anemic one at this point. The first stage is okay. This stage, we only have 600 meters per second in, so that will require potentially some work. I don't know why I quick saved here. We're going to revert this. We're always going to revert that. But we now know that we can deliver this payload into orbit decently. And now the question is delivering it into lunar orbit. Because we need to land and return, right? And I do believe that we have enough in here for this. I would just prefer to have this stage have an extra like 400 DV in it, but it's fine. I think that we can launch this as is next episode. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, James, Shadowwolf, and Lohan80, Rogue Corvid, Kentogan, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Anna the Elephant, Soccerman12 UK, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.